Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome, David. Welcome, Jonathan. Hello, Patricia.
Thank you. Good afternoon to you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you again for the third time. Oh, Susan's still connecting. Patricia, hello.
I'm going to be on and off video a little bit today, so I apologize for that. But on audio.
Sounds good. I do that sometimes too, like when I need to take a drink or if I drop my pen. So.
Well, it's smart. I continue to say the last meeting I was on with you folks was the best run Zoom meeting I've ever been on, with the online polling, with the group discussion. It is a model to follow. No offense against VTA or anything, but I was frankly surprised. It was really, really good. So
thank you. We've done a couple of those with VTA. It's taken a while to figure it out and get the kinks worked out, but that feedback is very much appreciated.
Yeah, you could tell you put some investment into it, time, and it just was really good. So I thought I'd share that. Thank you.
Awesome. Love to hear that feedback. Thank you for sharing. Okay, anyone else in the waiting room? We'll just give it a minute or two longer. Usually give about 5 minutes for folks to join. 4 minutes. Although I'm not seeing anyone else in the waiting room, and we are at 4:03, so I'm going to suggest that we jump in, because there's some intro to start. The meet comes up a little bit later. So let's see what we have in the chat. Oops, sorry, that was sorry, Susan. I meant to send that to you. We might have some programming stuff that we need to deal with, and let's connect on that after this meeting. And you just saw me fail using Zoom. That's why you need to be careful who you're sending to.
After all my compliments, right?
Okay, so here we go. We're going to get started. And a reminder that we are recording. So hello, thank you for joining us again today to talk about VTA's BART Silicon Valley Phase 2 project. I'm Doug Moody. I'm still standing in as facilitator while we continue to work to identify the long right-term facilitator for the CWGs. Next slide. Today, we're going to start with Erica providing a summary of what we heard recently from the community regarding community priorities for the station, both from last month's CWG and from the community social that VTA hosted for the project on August 27th. Then Tony Bauer, who's with the CP2 Tunnel and Track Work team, will share with you some of the proposed innovations coming out of talks with the contractor team that was hired to build the tunnel. And then following that, we'll have Peter Sokoloff. He'll have some info to share with you about the station refinements process that's underway for the downtown and Diridon stations. That's following direction from the VTA board. Then Erica will share with you information about the potential West Side Underground Concourse for this Santa Clara station. And then we'll have space at the end for CWG member report outs. And just a reminder that these are the CWG member report outs. Part of the meeting is your opportunity to share with the group how you've been sharing information and updates about the BSV2 project with your communities and what you've heard from them, right? We definitely want to hear that from you. There's also space to talk about the other things you want to talk about there at the end. Then we also have some information to share about upcoming meetings, including November CWG meeting and upcoming VTA Board of Directors meetings for the BSV project will be discussed. Next slide, please. So before we jump into the presentation, let's go around and ask the CWG members to introduce themselves. Just state your name and your organization, please. I'm going to go down the list. I don't see Anna today. It's Christian. I don't see Christian. Is there anyone else with the Silicon Valley Chamber of Commerce? Todd. I don't see Todd. Or if there's anyone else with Hunter Storm.
Actually, Todd is here. Yeah.
Oh, there's Todd. Hey, Todd.
I'm sorry. Good afternoon. Nice to meet you, and sorry about being tardy here.
And Todd, you're representing Hunter Storm.
That is correct.
Cool. Thanks for being here, Todd.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invite.
David, I do see you. David, you want to say hi to the group?
Yeah, hey, everybody. Dave Schoenwetter from Santa Clara University. Good to be here for my second time.
I don't see Jack. If there's anyone else South Bay Historic Railroad Society, please say hello. Or John. Anyone else from the Newhall Neighborhood Association, please say hello. Jonathan Evans, I do know you're here. Do you want to say hello to the group? Jonathan.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Evans, and I'm the president of the Old Quad Residents Association. I'm filling in for the CWG.
Cool. Thank you, Jonathan, and welcome. Luke, I don't see Luke on the line. Or Ron. I don't see Ron. Or is there anyone else at Bellarmine? I don't believe there is. So thank you, CWG members, for being here. Next slide, please. So just some quick updates about upcoming meetings. We will have a CWG meeting again in November, and the BSV project will be talked about at a number of upcoming VTA Board of Directors meetings. There's a workshop this Friday tomorrow, and there'll be a Board of Directors meeting in October on the 6th, then another one in November, and Kristen will email out alerts for other meetings to the group. And so that's all I have for now. Next slide, please. Next up, we have Erica to share with you the summary from our recent engagement activities. Erica, over to you.
Thank you. Next slide. As you may recall, in our last CWG meeting, or for those of you who weren't there, we had breakout rooms and we conducted the station priority period exercise, where you were asked to identify the most important station element for the Santa Clara BART station. As a group, before we broke out into the breakout groups, more efficient routes was voted on through our polling as the most important station element, followed up by landmark sign and represent history, both at 20% each, and more efficient routes was at 50%. So then we broke out into 3 different small groups to build our own priority pyramids, and those pyramids have been consolidated into the summary pyramid here, with similar results to our initial poll. More efficient routes was the top station element amongst the groups, followed by representing history. The least important elements amongst all groups was having performance space, static art on the facade, and providing more seating. Next slide. As Doug mentioned earlier, on Saturday, August 27th, VTA hosted a community social event in downtown San Jose, which attracted over 100 attendees throughout the day. The event provided an opportunity for the community to come and interact with project staff, learn more about the project, and provide feedback on various elements. Attendees were encouraged to engage with staff at each table to learn about the project and provide input. Next slide. A significant amount of information was available for the attendees, both in printed form and through VTA staff. Each station had its own table, including one for Santa Clara Station. And as you can see in the top right corner there, Anna was out visiting with us, and we're happy to see her there. Tables were also available in addition to the stations regarding construction, tunneling, and the city of San Jose had a couple of tables as well. We had some fly-through videos of the stations, photo ops, various things available there. It was a fun event, but very hot. Next slide. At the Santa Clara BART station table, VTA asked attendees to provide feedback on station priorities, similar to what we discussed in the CWG meetings. So similar to the results from CWG, more efficient routes was identified as the most important element by the attendees of the social, followed by representing history and integrating with surroundings. Next slide. So this graph here overlays the feedback from the CWG in dark blue with the community social in light blue. So as a recurring theme here, more efficient routes was the community's most important station element, which I'm going to touch on more later in the meeting today. Represent history being the second most important, tied with the landmark sign. At the social, integrating with the surroundings was the third highest element beyond representing history. So the prioritization of these elements will help inform the final design and the look and feel of the Santa Clara station as we move forward and once the contractor is on board. Any questions regarding this feedback that we received from the community?
David had his hand up.
Yeah, real quick. Hey, thanks for that recap. Just today, actually, we talked about this relative to last mile accommodations. And if I'm not making sense, it was around what is the shared transportation, whether it's scooters or bikes or Bird is one of the providers of that in or around the new station. And if you haven't considered that, I would just suggest, think about that. And where do those park? How do those stack up? What do those look like? What are the volumes or numbers? So to accommodate that last mile from the station to somewhere else.
Yes, we do have space for that accommodated in the design that we are anticipating micromobility to be at the station. So,
Micromobility, that's the word I was looking for. Thanks, Erica.
yes, welcome.
Are there any other questions for Erica or the content she presented or comments? And Jonathan, I see your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, for the community social feedback, did you do any like feedback sessions for riders at the station itself, or is it just the event in downtown San Jose?
This is just from summarizing the feedback we got at the event in downtown San Jose. But we did promote it through social media and through our city partners and through the CWG members, as you all saw the invites come out. So we've had a variety of folks come out. But yes, that line is from that specific event that was on the 27th in downtown San Jose.
Okay, thanks.
Sure thing.
Any other questions or comments for Erica before we go over to Tony and CP2 Innovations?
Actually,
Hey.
I have, sorry, I'll wait.
No, go
trying to
ahead,
find it.
Councilmember Park. Go ahead. I'll go after.
Just curious, I think that from the previous slide, the options that people were given were pre-selected by you or by, like, where did these options come from?
These options came from the initial kind of station look and feel effort that we had and kind of the general guidance for urban design and kind of what we've been talking about in the community working groups and through our design review committees and the various efforts. We are definitely open to other input from others as well, and had discussions with folks. Our discussions weren't limited to only what's on the board here, but this is what they, provided ranking on.
Understood. So I see the landmark sign, I see the modern aesthetic, I see the dynamic facade, I see representing history, more efficient routes. What does more efficient routes actually pertain to? I mean, a lot of these look like aesthetic look and feel and, what we'd like the station to represent, but it doesn't go into any of the questions that at least the people in the city brought up in the BART meetings, which include access. And
right, that's what this is. This is access. This is the passenger experience from the west. This is what we're able to control, right? And some of the comments that the city brought up, are things that are outside of the control of the BART project, but there are several things that are within the control, of the BART project. So that's what I'm going to touch on more. So the passenger experience, these are all kind of related to the passenger experience, including the access routes. We've heard loud and clear, from the city and the community that there's a desire for it. And see area for improvement there. And so I'm going to talk through that a little bit later after Tony's presentation more on what we've come up with for that, that we're advancing.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Bernice.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, because when the question was over this app, but these particular responses were specifically for the Santa Clara station, correct? Like we had a special booth just for the Santa Clara station. So they weren't like Broadway, and they were specifically for the Santa Clara station. I just wanted to emphasize that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that.
And I think I can also add that there was a lot, the last CWG meeting focused on presenting why a lot of the core elements of the station are what they are. And then the VTA team put a lot of work into identifying categories where community feedback can shape station design. So that's what a lot of these categories are. There are things we've heard in the station look and feel effort, but it's also things like the Western Underground Concourse, for example, right, that we talked about the last CWG meeting that Erica will have a detailed section on today. So just would like to mention that as well. Any other questions or comments on the community feedback received? The summary of that Erica just presented before we move on.
Are there any plans to ask for feedback at the station for like riders who are actively taking transit right now?
Yeah, Erica, do you want to take that? We do some
Okay.
tabling events.
Yeah, I was going to say we've had some various tabling events. We've had gone to the Santa Clara Farmers Market. We are going to the Art and Wine Festival this weekend. We're going to the Parade of Champions, where we're gathering feedback at all these locations within the city.
But not at the station itself, where the people who take it would be.
We currently don't have tabling events planned at the station itself right now.
Okay.
Correct.
Thanks.
And I apologize. I'm looking for a place where I can raise my hand, but I don't see.
It's under reactions.
Under reactions. Okay, it says
Yeah.
reactions, recognize hand gestures. Oh, I see. There it is.
Kevin, I do see your hand up.
Yeah, it's kind of a moot point, but as someone who takes Caltrain, and I take the more, kind of a direct route up, I think that asking people who take Caltrain what they would think if they would, move over to BART would be a useful question as well. I'm sure that there are a lot of people that currently use Caltrain to go different places that could also convert to BART if BART were available.
Thank you for that comment. We do need to move on in the interest of time, and we'll get that in the notes. We'll keep thinking about that, and we can also come back to that later in the meeting. But first, we need to get through some of these other sections. And I know, Tony, you have some personal time constraints. We want to give you space to present as a professional and also do the things you need to do otherwise. So, Tony, you're up.
Thanks, Doug. So hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Tony Bauer. I am the Deputy Project Manager for Contract Package 2, which is one of the 4 contracts for the program. Our contract is called the Tunnel and Track Work Contract, but in addition to constructing the 5-mile-long tunnel for this project, we will also be installing the track work inside of the tunnel and also constructing the deep excavations that are needed for the 3 underground stations at downtown Dirodon and 28th Street, Little Portugal. So that's the scope of our project, and we have just awarded the CP2 contract to our selected contractor, which is Kiewit Shea Trailer. That's a joint venture between those 3 firms. And we just awarded that contract in June. We've been working very hard with them over the past 3 months or so on some innovations that were proposed in their proposal. And we wanted to share with you some of those initial results in these 3 community or the CWG meetings this week. So we can go to the next slide, please. So at the May 5th board meeting is when we went to the VTA Board of Directors and asked for authorization to award the CP2 contract. As part of that authorization, we received guidance to conduct 3 parallel activities. The first is a evaluation or a peer exchange on the tunneling methodology. So that's an activity that's happening in parallel, and the results of that are going to be presented to the VTA Board of Directors in the coming weeks. The second one, which is what we're going to talk about, which I'm going to talk about today, is the contract package 2, which is the evaluation of these innovations. And then the third is a second look or a continued look at the station design refinements. And I believe Peter's going to be presenting a little bit more on that after I'm done. And as we talked about a little bit, we've had a couple of meetings already with the VTA and BART Board of Directors, and we have a board workshop which we're preparing for that'll be tomorrow. Next slide, please. So this is a bit of a schedule of what those 3 parallel activities are. But yeah, as we said, we awarded the CP2 contract to KST in June, which kicked off a limited notice to proceed for evaluating those innovations, and we're concluding that right now. And we presented initial findings to the board recently. We've also been providing, our contract has been providing input to the 2 parallel activities, the station design refinement effort and that peer exchange. And then on the last line there's just again summarizing the board of directors engagement that we've had over the last couple of weeks, and we will in the coming weeks. Next slide, please. So as some of you may or may not know, the CP2 contract is being delivered with what we call a progressive design build delivery model. But this is a pretty innovative way to deliver a construction transit project. But it involves engaging our contractor early in the process to solicit their input on the design of the overall project. And so it's very important to get that constructibility and cost and schedule feedback from a contractor who's going to build the job early in the process to make a better project. And one of the ways to do that, to get that early engagement, is through a progressive design build model. Now, that model starts by defining high-level requirements for the project and overall goals, and then allowing the contractor to come up with the design collaboratively with VTA, BART, and our stakeholders that will meet those project goals and those project requirements. So as expected, when we collected proposals in December of last year from our 2 bidders, each one of those proposals contained a number of really great ideas that we wanted to work with the contractor to further evaluate. And some have some pretty significant impacts on the overall configuration of the project. So as part of that board award that the board of directors authorized us in May, they directed us to study over the next 90 days these innovations that were included in the proposal jointly with the KST team. We evaluated these innovations using these 4 main criteria. So the first criteria is looking at the innovation's impact on operations, maintainability, and safety. So this is how the system will work once it's complete. These are obviously very important criteria for the operator, who will be BART at the end of the day. The second one is we didn't want any of the innovations to negatively impact the overall passenger experience that they will have once the project is constructed. So this is the look, the feel, the way that the passenger will interact with the stations and with the system once it's in operation. Thirdly, this is where the majority of our contractors' experience comes in, but bringing that constructability input into the design. So how can we design these projects to be easier to construct, faster to construct, less risky to construct? And then the fourth is, of course, what impacts would these innovations have to improve the cost of the project and improve the schedule to construct it? Next slide, please. So as part of the KST team's proposal, there were 38 innovations, and we worked with them to eliminate some that just couldn't be considered for a number of reasons, and then consolidate others into a list of about 16 key innovations that were evaluated in this last 90 days. Then, as I discussed earlier, we issued KST a limited notice to proceed to evaluate these 16 innovations in this 90-day window, and we're just wrapping that up and sharing the results of our last 3 months of hard work with groups like this. Next slide, please. Here's a map of where the 16 key innovations. The 16 innovations, and the map is really meant to show that these innovations span from end to end. So the east portal in Santa Clara all the way to the west portal at the west side of the job. Some of these innovations were, we would say, more constructability or means and methods types of innovations that are just about the way that the project is built. And then others are really big innovations that really change the configuration of the overall project. And so we wanted to focus on those, the bigger innovations, and those are the 3 that we're going to talk about, number 4, 8, and 2 here in that order. And so over the next couple of slides, I want to talk through those 3. Next slide, please. So the first is what we're calling the side-by-side track innovation with a center platform. So let's start by remembering what the original design configuration was. So that's on the left-hand side here. Now this is a rendering of what the downtown and Diridon stations would look like. So I think you all are very familiar with this, with the stacked platform arrangement in the single bore tunnel. So these 2 trainways are on top of each other, stacked one on top of each other. And this is, again, really just at the downtown and Diridon areas of the underground portion of the alignment. And that's a 5-mile stretch, and this was only about 1.5 miles or so where the trains would be in this stacked arrangement. Now, coming in from the Berryessa side, going underground, going along Santa Clara, and then eventually out on the west portal into Santa Clara, the trains in the original design would be in a side-by-side, traditional arrangement. Now, to get from that side-by-side arrangement to this stacked arrangement that you see, you can imagine that the trains had to do this complicated dance between moving from a side-by-side arrangement to that stacked arrangement. Now, when our contractor KST started looking at this for their bid, they immediately flagged that area where the trains would transition from side-by-side to stacked and then transition opposite down back to side-by-side again as extremely costly and time-consuming to build. It's all very bespoke, custom formwork for concrete, very time-consuming, and had to really be done at the end of the job. And so if we can click to the next one, that has led to the proposed innovation, which is the contractor is proposing that we can actually increase the size of the tunnel by about 5 feet. So a slight increase in the diameter of the tunnel. But what that would allow us to do is locate the trains side by side completely from end to end of the underground alignment. So it would be consistent from the east portal all the way to the west portal where the trains are relatively at this same location. And that would allow us at the underground stations to put a center platform in between the two trainways. Now, this standardization of the tunnel cross section allows us to more systematically construct the way that we build the structures inside the tunnel, and we're actually able to build some of these structures as we're constructing the tunnel. So the tunnel is being built here, is being bored ahead of us, and then several thousand feet behind where the tunnel is being constructed, the internal structures are being constructed. And so that allows us significant time savings and associated cost savings with that approach. As you can also see that the center platform at these stations can be accessed from a mezzanine level, which you can sort of see towards the back of the rendering there. So passengers would come into this mezzanine level, which would be above the platform, and would come down stairs or elevators to the platform level. It also gives us a lot of flexibility in how we can arrange the station entrance locations, and Peter's going to talk a little bit more about this. But the station, the mezzanine is very flexible, and where those station entrances is a lot more flexible than the previous design. Next slide, please. This is just talking about some of the benefits of this arrangement in terms of operability or operational flexibility. Because of that standard side-by-side track arrangement, it allows us more flexibility of where we're going to locate that special track work or the switches from one track to the other. So in the event of maintenance on a particular piece of track, or in the event of an emergency, it allows BART a lot more flexibility in terms of how they operate the system, being able to move trains from one track to the other, and we can really optimize the location of those crossovers or those switches, which we didn't have as much flexibility in the original design. In terms of the stations and the station arrangement, we feel that the passenger experience is improved. It's much more of a standard system of standard station arrangement that people are very familiar with. You know, there's a lot of center platform station configurations throughout the BART system, so it will be very familiar to people using it. And then we think in the event of an emergency, it's more intuitive for emergency egress, and it's a bit shorter of a distance for a passenger to a point of safety. We talked a little bit about the improved construction sequencing and schedule. And then the last bullet is the station entrances for downtown and Diridon will be offside or to the side of where the bored tunnel is. And the way that we connect those station entrance boxes to the tunnel are with small tunnels that we call adits. And so we're able to, with this innovation, able to standardize and optimize the size and number and location of those adits to improve construction efficiency and reduce risk. Next slide, please. This is a rendering of downtown San Jose Station. So you can see on the left-hand side there is the main station entrance, which was at the Chase Bank location. And at the top right is the second entrance for downtown San Jose. And you can see those mezzanines, which we were talking about earlier, but there are individual mezzanines that are associated to each one of those entrances. So passengers would again come down from the station, from the street level down to this mezzanine level, through those adits and onto the mezzanine, and they would be able to go down to the platforms via the stairs or the elevators from the mezzanine. Now, we call this the split mezzanine concept because it's not a continuous mezzanine that runs the entire length of the station. We have those distinct mezzanines for each entrance. And what that allows us to do is in between the two mezzanines, we have a much higher headspace, higher ceiling height, which will be a much more inviting and open space. And we think that it has big passenger improvements, passenger experience improvements compared to the original design. Next slide, please. And I won't go through all of these, but we talked about the criteria we evaluated these innovations against, and here they're repeated there. But we see big improvements in all of those criteria: the operability, safety, maintainability, and the cost and schedule benefits that we saw earlier, or that we talked about earlier. Next slide, please. So the next innovation is regarding 28th Street, Little Portugal, and it really builds off the first one that we discussed. So on the left-hand side, I think you all are familiar with this rendering, which is the rendering for 28th Street, Little Portugal Station. The original design was much more of a traditional underground station concept, where a large station box would be excavated from the street level down, and it would be about the length of the platforms. And then the tunnel boring machine would come into the box, and it would be dragged through that box and relaunched at the other side to complete the tunnel. And then it would be spit out from the bottom to the top. Now, the station box that would be required for 28th Street Station is a pretty significant excavation. And so to demonstrate that, we created this graphic on the right-hand side, showing that hole that would need to be created for this station would be about 3 football fields long. It would also be deep enough to fit a 10-story building. And so what the KFT, the contractor's innovation is that why don't we, since we've standardized the whole tunnel from end to end, why don't we standardize this station and make it a very similar station to what we're building in downtown and Diridon? And so that would allow us to have a much smaller excavation needed from the surface to access the station level. And really, we'd be able to cut that excavation, that 3 football field long excavation, down to the size of about that red rectangle that we're showing in that graphic on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. So these are renderings of the 2 options we are considering for those station entrance boxes at 28th Street Station. On the left-hand side, you can see our rectangular option that we're evaluating. And you can see that it's sized to accommodate the vertical circulation, or the stairs and the escalators and the elevators from the street level down to the platform level. And then the majority of the station would be built within the bored tunnel without a need for an excavation from the surface. And then similarly on the right-hand side, this is a second option that we're looking at, which has a circular station excavation with those escalators and elevators and stairs located in that circular excavation. Next slide, please. And then back to the criteria again, we see massive improvements in this innovation compared to the original design. Operability is improved, safety, maintainability, and significant improvements in construction impacts to the surrounding area because of the smaller excavation, and improvements in cost and schedule here. Next slide. And then the third one, the third innovation we'll talk about is regarding the emergency ventilation system. So, and I will say this one also builds on the first innovation that we talked about. Now, aside from the 3 underground stations, which we are constructing for the project, we are intending to build 2 mid-tunnel facilities. The first is at Stockton and Shield Avenue on the west side of the alignment. And then the second is at 13th and Santa Clara on the east side of the alignment, where those 2 red dots are. And these structures are primarily there to house the emergency ventilation equipment needed. So these are large, like 10-foot diameter fans that would be turned on in the event of an emergency. But because of the size of the fans and associated operations equipment that are needed, these structures are pretty significant. So you can see that silhouette of the man in that red circle there. just for a bit of a sense of scale. But these are about 100-foot deep structures, and they're, you can imagine, they're very costly and time-consuming to build. So the innovation that that a contractor has provided is really building on the first concept, where we talked about the standardization of the tunnel from end to end, and the below where the train level is, there's a void space that's being created underneath of the trainway. And the contractor is proposing to use that void space for ventilation purposes. And if we can jump to the next slide, we can sort of see visually what that looks like. This is an isometric of the tunnel between stations. So this is not the stations. And you can see on the bottom right there where it says invert ventilation duct. This is that void space that we talked about being created below the trainway. Now, in the event of a fire, so say we have a train fire, smoke would rise up to the top of the tunnel, and then it would be pulled into these EVS stacks, is what we're calling them. But essentially, you can think of them as chimneys, which go from the top of the tunnel to the bottom. And so the smoke would be pulled into those EVS stacks and then pulled downwards into the bottom of the tunnel, where then the smoke would be taken to the nearest emergency ventilation shaft. Now, because of the standardization of the cross-section from end to end, we have this continuous duct from end to end. And so it allows us a lot more flexibility in where we can locate that emergency ventilation equipment. Now, what's proposed in the innovation is, how can we look at moving the emergency ventilation equipment that was at these mid-tunnel facilities elsewhere, like at the station locations, and would allow us to eliminate the need for the mid-tunnel facilities in their entirety. So if we can jump to the next slide, we think we've come up with a solution for moving all of that equipment, and we feel that we can avoid having to build these facilities, which obviously will have cost benefits there by not having to construct these. There will be associated reduction in impacts to the surrounding communities where these facilities were going to be constructed, but then also long-term and be in operation. And it improves the safety of the system by reducing the number of access points that would have to the system. So again, big benefits here. We're very excited about this particular innovation. Now, in terms of timing, we have a busy couple of years ahead of us. So we're moving into the final design phase of our project. And so we're delivering the project in two phases. Phase one, or stage one, is essentially a final design phase. And then stage two will be the heavy construction work. We are anticipating starting the heavy construction in mid-2024 or so. Now, in between now and then, we have a lot of work to do in terms of doing design and getting approvals for the project. Now, in order to meet our overall program schedule, we do need to start certain construction activities earlier than the stage 2 date, where we'll kick off most of the construction. Now, these are for long lead items. One example is purchasing the tunnel boring machine. So this is a large piece of construction equipment that has a long lead time. It'll take between 18 and 24 months for the vendor to manufacture the machine, assemble it, test it, disassemble it, ship it to our site, and then reassemble it for testing. So we need to start that process early. And so we are planning to go back to the VTA Board of Directors at the end of this year or early next year to ask for authorization to go ahead and purchase that tunnel boring machine and some other early works. And then we also anticipate going back to the Board of Directors for other enabling works contracts, such as utility relocation, some building demolition, and other enabling works towards the end of 2023. So we'll have some construction activities happening in 23 and 24, with the heavy construction starting in mid-24. And I think that's my last slide.
I think you're right, Tony.
Yes, okay. So yeah, I'd be happy to take any questions that you guys have.
And Marissa, can we go back to the previous slide for discussion? And David had his hand up and is on camera. David.
Yeah, Tony, real quick. I applaud your innovations. And it brings to mind Lean Construction Institute. If you're not a member of that or know about Lean Construction and some of the premises there, it's fantastic what you're doing. And I think it'll pay dividends in the long run anytime you get the people who are going to do the work to have a voice in the design of the work. So I'm just good job, man. Thanks.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. I think the earlier you can get the contractor involved in the process, the better the whole program will be. So
yeah, too many people think competitive is the way to go, and then you get killed in change orders. This is the way to go in a municipal project like this. You haven't missed a beat. Good job, Tony.
thank you.
All right. Jonathan, I see your hand up. You're up next.
Yeah, I saw your map. You had there were some innovations like 18, 19, 12, 13, 10, and 3, and maybe 32. Those are kind of new to Santa Clara Station. What were those innovations?
So I don't have all of that. Maybe could we jump back to slide 15 or 16, whichever that map was. I don't have all of them. I can talk to a couple of them. So one of the options or one of the innovations, for example, that we were talking about is to build a tunnel. It is a series of concrete segments that are put together like Legos. And so the tunnel boring machine will build this, this lining, this tunnel lining as we go. Now, each one of those segments is a very significant, very large concrete structure. Now, what's traditionally done in the United States is that those segments are built offsite somewhere at a precast concrete facility, and they are trucked in. Now, because of the size of our tunnel and the size of these segments, it would basically be, or it would be a significant amount of truck traffic that's needed to bring those segments from, say, Stockton all the way to our site in San Jose. So one of the exciting innovations that the contractor has proposed is to actually build those concrete segments on site here at Newhall Yard. We have almost 40 acres at that site. And so they're going to be setting up a temporary precast concrete facility on the site with its only purpose is to produce tunnel segments. And so those will be built on site, stored on site until they have cured to a high enough strength, and then they'll be installed right from there. So we're really excited about this one because it has big environmental benefits by reducing truck traffic, safety benefits because you obviously anytime you have a lot of truck traffic, you have safety or risks associated with that. So we're excited about that one. We're also looking at other concrete work which we can do or stage from that yard because again we have so much space there. It's kind of unique, honestly, in an urban tunneling environment. I've worked on a lot of other projects in urban areas, and I've never seen such a big site for staging, and so it's something that we're trying to take full advantage of. And so a lot of those innovations that are on that side have to do with that.
Tony, was there a public meeting or will there be where some of these other innovations were discussed in greater depth?
So I think what we really tried to narrow it down to those three, and not for any particular reason of not wanting to share, but some of them are so detailed and very nuanced that we don't really have a plan to share those in a public forum. But I think we did share a list with the names of all the innovations in some other public setting.
If possible, it'd be good to get that information. I know I don't think our Newhall Neighborhood Association friends are here, but I think they'd like to know a little bit about what's going to happen right next to their homes.
I recall seeing that list. I think we can probably find that and send that over to Jonathan. Eric, I saw you come on. You came on camera.
Yeah, I was just going to also mention that these are the proposed innovations, and so they're not all guaranteed to happen yet. So yes, while some of them may happen at adjacent to their neighborhood, Jonathan, I just want to make sure that as you share with them that it's not that these are fully done and baked, that these are still proposed at the time.
Sure, I'm sure there's a process to go through this, but it'll go through the IR process and all that. If they have effects. I had two other questions for just this section. What's the advantage of this wider tunnel now that we have side by side versus the original twin bore design, which gave a similar side by side configuration?
So there's a number of a number of benefits. So the single bore benefit is still there compared to twin bore in terms of the amount of street disruption, utility relocations that would be required for twin bore. Also, if we could jump to the slide with the emergency ventilation concept. Right there, yeah. So in a BART system, you have to have 2 trainways connected with cross passages every 300 feet. So that is to allow, you can see those people who would be evacuating a train in an emergency. That would allow them to evacuate the train and walk down this emergency walkway and through that door to the opposite side, which would be a point of safety. And so that's required in the entire BART system. Now, if you had twin bore, you would still have to provide that ability for passengers to go from one trainway to the other. And the way that you would do that is you would create smaller tunnels in between the 2 twin bore tunnels, and those would have to be every 300 feet or so. And so those are significant structures that are very costly and very time consuming and very risky to build. And there would be dozens and dozens of them required over the 5 miles in a twin bore arrangement, where we've been able to eliminate that with a single bore arrangement. So that's just one, but there's a lot of reasons that we prefer this concept.
Okay, and go ahead.
Go ahead, Jonathan. I'm just gonna, we are at time for Tony's segment, so I don't want to cut off your question, but if Tony needs to run, I want to give him the ability to do that.
Okay, so I have one more question, and it's about actually this picture. So, you mentioned there's a place of safety. I was kind of curious about, if I understood this, you're actually not going to build those ventilation facilities anymore. And I guess this is kind of a 2-part question. First, like, where will the smoke and the ventilation vent out in the event that you're using this invert ventilation duct? And then the second kind of related question is, smoke and heat generally rises, and so usually this seems to be working against the natural proclivity of the smoke to rise, since the ducting is actually below. Is this something that's fully sealed, so there's no concern that the smoke will just drift right back up into the area where the passengers are trying to escape, or are at their place of safety?
Yep. No, it's a great question. So I think your first question was about the emergency ventilation facilities. It's not that we're not building emergency ventilation facilities. We are building emergency ventilation facilities. We are just relocating that equipment to other facilities that we're already building for the stations and for the portals. So those emergency fans, instead of being at the Stockton and 13th Street facilities, they would be relocated to the stations or to the portals. And so we're able to take advantage of those facilities that we're already having to build for the stations and then locate the emergency ventilation equipment there. And that's very common on underground transit projects. Most of the time, the emergency ventilation equipment is incorporated into the station. The second one was about the smoke path of travel. And so, yes, you're right. I mean, hot smoke does rise, cold smoke falls. So now the smoke in a fire event would be hot, but we have sufficient airflow capacity with these fans to be able to pull that smoke in. And that's been demonstrated in modeling and also in field tests, and will have to be demonstrated in safety certification tests before we open the system. And then we also have leakage requirements in the contract that will ensure that all of these structures are sealed sufficiently so that you don't have smoke migrating from the what we call the incident track to the non-incident track.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate the answers.
Yep, thank you.
Cool, thank you. And in the interest of time and being respectful to Tony, thank you for such a great presentation, Tony, and your responses to questions. Always nice to have you here. We're going to move over to Peter to talk about the station refinement process for downtown and Diridon stations. Peter, you're up.
Thank you, Doug. My name is Peter Sokoloff. I'm one of the architects working on the BSV team on the design of the stations, both for CP4, which is the 3 stations that are part of the tunneling, as well as Santa Clara. So today we just wanted to give you an update on the station refinement process that we're currently undergoing for both downtown and Diridon stations. If you go to the next slide. So as part of the awarding of the CP2 contract, the VTA board asked for us to engage in a station refinement process in order to achieve some of these goals that you see A, B, C at the bottom of the page: improving connectivity for riders, especially intermodal connections at Diridon. And then at downtown, looking to enhance pedestrian safety by looking at potential alternative entrance locations, as well as improving the circulation within the station. And then at both stations, looking to improve transit-oriented development opportunities. If you go to the next slide. So what we've been engaged with a group of stakeholders, both from the city of San Jose and other interested parties, to go through a station refinement process and come up with alternatives to the current design. And then we've agreed on a series of evaluation considerations that we would use to evaluate the different options that we come up with. They include urban design factors, like how it integrates with the rest of the city and transit-oriented development, station experience, things like the travel time, visibility and safety, and aesthetic expression and identity, and then implementation impacts such as cost, constructability, schedule, and any right-of-way impacts or environmental impacts. And then, of course, we're also looking at who's using the system. And so in working with BART and others, we kind of have developed the below kind of criteria of different users, from, people with either non-able-bodied people, seniors, foreign language speakers, etc. So we're evaluating not just for a typical user, for all of these subgroups as well. If you go to the next slide. And so some of the technical requirements that we're trying to maintain as we consider some of these other options, and this is similar to the design review committee process that we went through about the station look and feel. These are more about the goals that I described earlier, but the parameters remain the same, trying to stay within the project footprint, meeting all of BART's requirements, being buildable, operable, maintainable, meeting the sustainability goals of the project, and of course, cost and schedule impacts as well. Go to the next slide. So some of the things that we have been looking at, and we're not going to go into that much detail today, but certainly stay tuned as we develop some of these concepts. You will have a chance to have a look and see the ones that we think are worth moving forward with. With the downtown and Diridon stations, one of the key things that we're looking at is shifting from the current circular shafts, deep shafts that we have, which bring people down to the tunnel, to more rectangular shaped shafts. If that does in fact improve opportunities for transit-oriented development or improve vertical circulation opportunities, so reducing the number of switchback of escalators, for example, at downtown is one of the things that we're looking at as one of those potential improvements. And then at both stations, we're looking at second entrance locations. At downtown, a second entrance would be focused on trying to improve integration with future DISC, the intermodal station, Concourse, and providing more direct access. And at downtown, it's about meeting one of the city's priorities of trying to provide an entrance on the south side of Santa Clara Street. So those are the key refinements that we've been exploring. And if you go to the next slide, I think that's it. Really, we're kind of at a stage where we have options, we're developing them, and then we will evaluate them based on the criteria that I described. So I'm also happy to answer questions on that process and where we are with that.
I just wanted to give a plug too that there will be a board of directors workshop tomorrow at 9 a.m. that will go into a lot more detail on this particular topic. So encourage you to listen if you're interested. And that would be the topic that Peter just finished, not the slide that's currently showing. So it's on the station refinement process.
Yes. So
is information about that available? Like, is it just on the VTA site? VTA meeting. If you'd like to attend that session.
Oh, you mean the link to the link to join? Yeah, it's on the website. I'll put the link into the chat where you can get the details.
Okay. I had one question, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer it, but I heard that there's a housing development, like I think it's the Eterna Tower project at 17 to 31 East Santa Clara Street. Do any of the refinements look at finding a way to preserve that project, which has a lot of affordable housing downtown, while still improving that station?
I don't think that any of them, I'm not familiar with that project, but I don't think that any of the refinements that we're talking about are impacting that building, at least not that I'm aware of. Are you saying that the current project is impacting that building already? Or is it the future disc station that's impacting it? Is it the one that's across from
my understanding is
Diridon?
no, this is the one that's over by, it's near the downtown station, and it's like got a pretty high affordable housing component, but I think VTA is opposing it because it interferes with the station downtown. I don't think I've ever seen VTA propose affordable housing before, but it's a.
I think there's a couple of things related to that. It's probably not for Peter to answer.
Yeah, I don't think Peter has the answer, so maybe we can just follow up offline, or I'll ask
like
somebody
the
else.
BSB project is environmentally cleared, so other things are supposed to respond to that. And then there's another thing related to property acquisitions that we don't talk about, the VTA real estate leads. I saw Bernice come off.
Yeah, I was gonna say that very much. Like, there were properties that are identified in the environmental document, and anything that's in the environmental document because of any potential negotiations, we as the outreach team do not get engaged. If there are potential, we only acquire properties that are required for the project. If there were something that changed things and a property wouldn't be required and that was definitive, and we had environmental clearance, then that has some potential as we evaluate these. But right now, anything that was identified in the environmental document and that is identified through engineering, that all gets handled through the real estate and acquisition process.
Okay, thanks. I was just curious about that. We can go on to the next topic.
I think we should, because I think there's going to be at the board meeting that Erica just shared the link to. There's some information on this in the CWG for downtown Diridon that we will post, and I think this is the topic that this group is interested in. So we can come back if there's questions for what Peter just presented. We can tackle that later. But Erica, you're up.
Great, thank you. Next slide. So as we mentioned to y'all in the July CWG meeting, the team has been exploring station refinements to enhance the passenger experience from the west side of the rail corridor for the Santa Clara station. So today we're going to dive into a little bit more into the details with some graphics. So we're exploring a potential west side underground concourse that would be in addition to the current design, which is the elevated concourse over the storage tracks. There will be direct access from the east end of the pedestrian undercrossing to this new west side partial underground concourse. We're including this design concept, the underground concourse, as an optional bid item in the CP3 RFP, as it's at much lower level of design than the rest of the station. Let's dive into it. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I'll walk through the features on the following slide, but first wanted to orient you here with this aerial view, showing the path of travel from the west side of the rail corridor with the red dashed line. So that's the path traveling through the pedestrian undercrossing to the station entrance. And the next slide, we'll dive into the details here. So this is the plan view, and then on the following slide, I'll walk through the cross section. To orient you, Brokaw Road is on the right side of the page. The Gateway Crossings development would be at the bottom of the page, and the existing rail corridor is along the top of the page. The green dashed area is the pedestrian undercrossing, and then the horizontal green area is the ramp up to Brokaw Road. So to access the underground concourse, passengers would enter the red arrow on the west side of the station on the top side of the screen. They would then continue through the fare gates, which are showed in the dashed pink area, and everything that's dashed on this graphic is underground. And then to the paid concourse, which is shown in the light blue, and where they would travel up to the ground level platform, which is orange and partially obscured by the elevated paid concourse area. So it extends that entire length there. Also, just a reminder that this will be in addition to the current design with the elevated concourse. So patrons coming from the west will still also have the option to take the elevators or stairs from the red arrow at the top of the page to the elevated concourse, where they'd pass through the fare gates in the solid pink line to the paid concourse and then travel to the down to the ground level station. And coming from the east, you would access from the red arrow on the bottom of the page to the east side of the station and traverse through the unpaid elevated concourse in dark blue to the fare gates and then down to the ground level platform. Now we'll walk through the cross section on the next page as it's a little bit more helpful to understand from this angle, I think. So coming from the east remains the same. From Champions Way, which is located number 1, passengers will use stairs, elevators, or escalators in area labeled as 2 to travel up to the elevated concourse, which is 3. If you park in the parking garage, you would come out that opening, which is adjacent to the number 3. And they would then proceed to the fare gates, which is labeled as number 5. And they would use elevators, stairs, or escalators to travel down to the ground level passenger platform, which is number 6. So from the pedestrian undercrossing, coming from the west side of the rail corridor, which is labeled as number 9, passengers using this potential west side underground concourse would enter through number 7. They would proceed down a short flight of stairs or a ramp into the underground concourse area. They would pass through a set of fare gates, which is labeled as 5, and then travel up via stairs, escalators, or elevators labeled as 2 to the ground level platform, which is 6. So also, if you're coming from the west side, you would still be able to come out number 9 and then be able to take elevators or stairs, which is labeled as 8, up to the elevated concourse, and then pass through the fare gates at 5 and down to the down to the ground level passenger platform at 6. On the next slide, we have a conceptual view of the entrance here from the bottom of the ramp that goes up to Brokaw Road to kind of help you get a better feel for what the station would look like. You can see the elevator shafts there kind of over on the right side of the screen. You can see the stairs going down. The ramp is kind of off to the left, off this view of this rendering. And then the next slide is another view. This is the conceptual view coming out of the tunnel. I'm sure you all are familiar with the shape of the tunnel with the arch on the top. Looking at this new potential concourse, west side underground concourse from the tunnel. So as I mentioned, the team is exploring this option, and there are many considerations and constraints that we're have to take into account. This partial underground concourse requires a second set of fare gates and a station agent booth, which would be occupied per BART requirements, both of which have long-term maintenance and operations costs associated with them. In addition, a ventilation system is required, and additional structural framing is needed to support the overhead rail structures. And due to the high water table in the area, extensive engineering is required to excavate and construct the underground station structure foundation. So we are including this option, this potential west side underground concourse, in the CP3 RFP as an optional bid item. And inclusion of this optional bid into the design may require VTA board direction and approval. And as we continue to advance this, we will continue to keep you updated on the progress here at the CWG meetings as we continue to evaluate and work through the considerations and constraints. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you all have related to this option that is in addition to the design that you have seen previously.
Here's Kevin. Kevin, you're up.
Yes, thank you. When you talk about optional bid item, what does it actually mean? It means that we have a plan without the West Side Underground Concourse, and you could optionally say we would like to build the West Side Underground Concourse. Meaning, like I guess, what does optional bid item? What are the implications of that?
Yeah, so we have the base design, with the elevated concourse, with access that way, and which is the design is farther along and more advanced than this West Side Underground Concourse. And so we have it as an optional bid item because the design level is different. So we'll have to bring it up to a greater level of design. And as it's something new, it's still being evaluated whether it's going to be included. So because it's a design build contract, then they'll provide their pricing for the baseline design as well as a price for the optional bid item. So it would be separate price. And then that gives VTA the flexibility to continue to advance this and figure out, what the best path forward is.
Okay, but if nobody bids and nobody suggests that they want to do this, it wouldn't get built.
Oh, no. So we have pre-qualified bidders for the CP3 contract. And so they will be providing a proposal, and their proposal will include a proposal for the baseline design and a proposal for this optional bid item.
Yeah,
It's just called an optional.
Clarify, Erica,
Yeah, go ahead.
the option is really VTA's. So the contractors will propose two prices, one including and one not including that item. And then the option is for VTA to choose which one they proceed with. So the option is not the contractors to say I will or won't build it, just to clarify.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Jonathan, I see your hand up. Please go ahead, Jonathan.
First thing I want to say is I appreciate this design. It looks like it's solved a lot of the kind of concerns about efficiency. So props to both all of you for coming up with this. I did have a couple of questions, and maybe it's because it's very preliminary, but do you have any initial thoughts on exactly where this pops up on the platform? And, how it fits in? I saw the two renders, but the map was a little hard.
Yeah, Marissa, if you can go back to slide 36. Then you can see the platform extends from, it's the orange box. So the rectangle that's on the right side of the screen extends down to where it touches a gray box at the left side of the screen, which is a BART supervisor booth. So that's the extent of the platform. And so it's toward the north end of the platform is where.
Okay, so if I'm looking at this and understanding what the underground part is, that light blue is the underground part that's paid, and then the dark blue is
part. The dash part is all underground.
Okay, so that's the middle, and then those little light blue in the center there, and then there's the okay.
Yes.
So it kind of just pops up. Yeah. Okay, cool. Just try to understand it.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Erica. Anna.
Hi, guys. I'm interested in this option on this design. So you say it's VTA decision. If VTA says we just don't have the budget for it, but it's actually in the long term better for the community, or the community wants this, what are the options for the community to advocate for it? Can we change their mind if they say no to the optional design? What are our opportunities there?
I think at this time, we're still trying to figure out kind of the process moving forward, but we will definitely keep you updated on how it advances and or when you can advocate. And we've heard loud and clear from the community that they're interested in something along this, from you all, that you're, would like improved passenger experience. And so it's good to hear from several of you today that you're, on board and like this design that we're advancing. I don't know that we know the exact details yet. I don't know, Bernice, if you have anything else to expand on related to that, but we'll definitely keep you updated.
Thank you.
This is something that we'll definitely present to the board as an information item as we look at all of these items we've discussed today, right? The station refinement effort and the innovations that will at some point either come to the board, either for an action or an information item, right? If it comes as an information item, the board would then be weighing in, right, to the project leadership team. But we're not sure yet whether this requires a board decision or whether it's basically the board opining in just on their give policy direction, right? So we're not definitive of the process. I think much of that will be determined by what this costs out to be and everything and all the other things with the project and when the board needs to weigh in.
Okay. And as we always do with the CWG, when we're going to the board with significant updates on the project, we will email you and let you know when it's planned to be taken to the board.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments for Erica?
Great, thanks.
Cool. There's a hand up. Patricia, I think that's a high five. So if you want to say something, please.
I'm
come
just
off mic.
clapping.
Okay,
That
good.
looks
Good to hear. Love that feedback. Moving on to the CWG member report back portion of the meeting. Next slide, please. You know, this is your time, right? But from a project perspective, we'd really like to hear from you. If not today, at upcoming CWG meetings, how have you been sharing information about the project with your communities and what you've heard? And you know, that practicing it a lot more important as we move closer and closer to construction. So if you have answers to that right now, we'd love to hear about that. Or if there's other things you'd like to say to the group or questions for the team, also, you know, on material presented earlier today, questions you might have from earlier, this is your time. So if you'd like to say something, please raise your hand and I will call on you. And Anna, I see you're off mute. If you want to just jump in, please feel free.
Yes, I wanted to commend you guys on your great social event that you had in the downtown. I was able to attend that and it was really very well attended. In fact, Suds Jane was there as well. And there were a lot of interested community in the area asking a lot of really excellent questions. I actually walked through the booth to kind of immerse myself in the experience and to experience what they were experiencing and seeing how successful it was. So I thought the displays were very detailed and conversation starting. And I took a lot of pictures to share on social media because I think it's important for people to get excited about it. And we also had a State of the City recently in Santa Clara, and it was an annual event that we hold. And usually the mayor covers some of our wins or highlights, achievements, and BART was definitely mentioned and in a positive way about that it was definitely coming to Santa Clara. The mayor seemed enthusiastic about it. So I think what you're doing with community outreach and our assistance and the CWG group, it's really paying off. So, and engaging us every step of the way. So kudos to you guys. Just
Great. Thank you so much, Anna. You're giving me warm fuzzies.
warm fuzzies.
Very much love that feedback, and it was great to see you at the community social. Anything else any of the CWG members would like to report back or share with the group?
Oh, and if you want to share your event, you have quite a list in the next month or so of community outreach dates.
Yes, I rattled a bunch of those off, I think, before you joined of events that we're coming to in Santa Clara. Starting this weekend with the Art and Wine Festival and the Parade of Champions, and we've been at Farmers Market, and yeah.
Great, thank you.
Great. Any other CWG members?
Oh, I just wanted to ask Erica, I wrote some of those down, but could you send me a list of all the outreach events you're doing? Because I'd like to include it in one of our newsletters to the rest of our members.
We can do that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Okay. Well, moving on then. Next slide, please. So just a reminder, the next we'll have a CWG meeting again in November, so we'll get to see you all back. Looking forward to that. This is the draft agenda. We will work with Anna to finalize this. So likely have a phase 2 update, perhaps an update from real estate, perhaps an update on community engagement, and then as always the CWG member report back where we want to hear from you. How are you talking with your communities? How are you sharing information about the project? What are you hearing? Next slide, please. And then just a reminder again about some of the upcoming meetings, the duplicate slide from before. I mentioned the November CWGs. We've talked quite a bit about the VTA Board of Directors workshop tomorrow. Erica shared a link to that in the chat. And then there'll be another VTA Board of Directors meeting in October and one in November where the BSV project will be discussed. And we'll email out info about other meetings. And that's all we got. So I think we're done. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a great night. We will see you around in November and in November at the next CWG meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.
Thank
Thank you so much. Have a nice afternoon or evening.
Thanks very much.
Wow.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.